April 8, 1943, 9:47 hours. 27,000 feet above Calais, France. The oxygen mask couldn't hide Oberleutnant Ralf Hermichen's smirk as he watched the ungainly silhouettes climbing laboriously toward his formation to the crystal-clear canopy of his Focke-Wulf 190A5. The veteran ace of Jagdgeschwader 26 years old and a native of Bremen, studied the American fighters making their combat debut over occupied Europe with the confidence of a man who had survived 3 years of continuous aerial warfare. "The Americans have sent us flying milk bottles," he transmitted to his wingman, unable to suppress his laughter at the sight of the massive Republic P-47 Thunderbolts struggling for altitude. Below them, 16 P-47C Thunderbolts of the 4th Fighter Group lumbered upward in tight formation. Their 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R 2800 double wasp engines straining against their 7-ton weight. To German pilots accustomed to the sleek Supermarine Spitfires and nimble Soviet fighters, these corporate American machines appeared almost comical, barrel-shaped fuselages topped with greenhouse canopies, wings that seemed too small for their massive bodies, propellers that dwarfed anything in the Luftwaffe inventory. What Hermichen didn't know, what none of the German pilots circling like wolves above could have imagined, was that they were witnessing the arrival of the weapon that would systematically destroy the Luftwaffe's fighter arm. Within 18 months, these flying milk bottles would transform from objects of derision into instruments of terror, their 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns becoming the most feared sound in German skies. The mathematics of destruction were already loaded in those broad wings. 3,400 rounds of ammunition, a combined rate of fire of 6,000 rounds per minute, enough concentrated firepower to saw a Messerschmitt in half in less than 2 seconds. The transformation began that April morning when Major Donald Blakesley, commanding the 335th Fighter Squadron, spotted the German formation positioning for attack. The former Eagle Squadron veteran, 31 years old from Fairport Harbor, Ohio, had transferred from RAF Spitfires just weeks earlier and understood what his men didn't yet know, that survival in the P-47 required abandoning everything they thought they knew about air combat. The Thunderbolt represented a radical departure from conventional fighter design philosophy. While the Germans had pursued lightweight interceptors optimized for climb and turn performance, Republic Aviation had created something unprecedented, a high-altitude juggernaut that used mass, power, and firepower to redefine the rules of aerial warfare. Among the 56 American pilots spread across the French sky, that morning were men who would become legends, future aces whose names would strike fear into Luftwaffe hearts. But on April 8, 1943, at 9:47 hours, they were novices in an untested machine, facing the most experienced fighter force in the world. The Germans had been fighting continuously since September 1939, with veterans of Poland, France, Britain, and Russia in their ranks. The Americans had been in combat for exactly 0 days. This is the story of how industrial logic defeated tactical brilliance, how quantity and quality merged into overwhelming superiority, and how German pilots' laughter turned to terror as they discovered what synchronized Browning machine guns could do to an aircraft at 400 yards. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt had emerged from a June 1940 panic. As German fighters swept across France, Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's Georgian-born chief designer, 42 years old and a naturalized American citizen since 1927, received urgent specifications from the U.S. Army Air Corps. They wanted a high-altitude interceptor capable of matching the Luftwaffe's best. What Kartveli designed instead was a monster that redefined the possible. "It will be a dinosaur," Kartveli admitted to his design team at Republic's Farmingdale, Long Island facility. "But it will be a dinosaur with good proportions." The XP-47B prototype that first flew on May 6, 1941, shocked everyone who saw it. At 9,900 pounds empty, it weighed 65% more than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer. The massive turbo-supercharger system, with its complex ducting running to the rear fuselage, gave it an almost pregnant appearance. Test pilots approaching it for the first time invariably asked the same question: "This thing actually flies?" Not only did it fly, it flew like nothing else at altitude. The Pratt & Whitney R 2800 double wasp engine, an 18-cylinder radial producing 2,000 horsepower, could maintain full power at 27,000 feet, where German fighters gasped for air. The turbo supercharger, fed by exhaust gases, delivered sea-level performance in the stratosphere, where the air was too thin for conventional superchargers to function effectively. Major Hubert Hub Zemke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group training at Bridgeport, Connecticut, initially despised the aircraft. The 30-year-old officer from Missoula, Montana, watched his unit lose 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in training accidents between September 1942 and January 1943. The P-47 ended more American lives in training than Germans would claim in the first months of combat. It ground-looped on landing, torque-rolled on takeoff, and dove with such enthusiasm that pilots discovered compressibility, their controls freezing as shock waves form on the wings at speeds approaching 500 miles per hour. But those who mastered it discovered something extraordinary. Second Lieutenant Robert Samuel Johnson, a farm boy from Lawton, Oklahoma, 21 years old and fresh from flight training, described his first flight in January 1943. It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it, you aimed it. The first combat encounters in April and May 1943 confirmed every German prejudice. The P-47s couldn't turn with the Focke-Wulf 190s, couldn't climb with the Messerschmitt 109s, couldn't match their nimble handling at medium altitudes. Luftwaffe pilots quickly developed tactics to exploit these weaknesses, attacking from below where the heavy Thunderbolts struggled, forcing turning fights where agility mattered more than firepower. Hauptmann Joseph Pips Priller, commanding officer at Jag Eschwader 26, 30 years old and already a veteran of over 400 combat missions, reported to headquarters after his first encounter with P-47s near Abbeville on April 15, 1943. The new American fighter is meat for the slaughter. It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow. Our boys are calling them Indianer, fat targets pretending to be warriors. The statistics seem to confirm German confidence. In their first month of operations, the American fighter groups lost 14 Thunderbolts for only 3 confirmed German aircraft destroyed. The Royal Air Force, observing from their Spitfire squadrons, quietly suggested the Americans might reconsider their choice of mount. British pilots joked that the best evasive maneuver in a P-47 was to unstrap and run around the roomy cockpit. But something strange was happening in those early encounters that German intelligence failed to notice. The P-47s that were shot down had absorbed incredible punishment before falling. One aircraft returned from a May 4th mission near St. Omer with 21 20mm cannon holes and over 100 machine gun strikes, damage that would have disintegrated a Messerschmitt or Spitfire. The massive radial engine, lacking vulnerable coolant systems, shrugged off hits that would have stopped a liquid-cooled fighter cold. More significantly, when P-47s did get their guns on target, the results were catastrophic. The Thunderbolt weapons battery created a convergent zone of destruction that German pilots had never experienced. Unlike the rifle-caliber weapons of early war fighters or the cannons with limited ammunition, the American fighter could maintain sustained fire for over 30 seconds, an eternity in aerial combat. The event that would begin changing German perceptions occurred on June 26, 1943, at 14:32 hours, over Le Havre, France. It involved Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron, and an encounter that would become legendary on both sides of the conflict. Johnson's formation of 48 P-47s was returning from escort duty near Calais when they were bounced by 16 Focke-Wulf 190s from 2/Jag Eschwader 26, led by Hauptmann Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, younger brother of the famous Adolf Galland. 29 years old and a veteran of the Eastern Front, Galland had 37 confirmed victories to his name. The Germans executed a perfect attack at 14:34 hours, diving from the sun with overwhelming speed advantage. Johnson's Thunderbolt, flying tail-end Charlie at the rear of the formation, was caught in the crossfire of multiple attackers, taking catastrophic damage in the first seconds of combat. 2 20mm cannon shells exploded across his aircraft. The canopy shattered, hydraulic fluid sprayed into the cockpit, the engine cowling was torn away, and fire erupted behind the instrument panel. Johnson, wounded in the nose and left leg by shrapnel and bullet fragments, tried to bail out but discovered the canopy was jammed. A 20mm shell had exploded in the canopy track, welding it shut. He was trapped in a dying aircraft at 27,000 feet. What happened next defied every assumption about combat damage tolerance. Despite having no forward visibility through the oil-covered windscreen, a barely functioning engine that shook violently, and controls that responded only intermittently, Johnson managed to level the aircraft and point it toward England. The P-47 continued flying with damage that would have reduced any other fighter to falling debris. Then it got worse. A lone Focke-Wulf 190 flown by an unknown pilot from 2/G 26 discovered the crippled Thunderbolt limping toward the channel at less than 170 miles per hour. Historical research has never definitively identified this pilot, though several names have been proposed based on German combat reports from that day. What followed was one of the most extraordinary encounters in aerial warfare history. The German pilot positioned himself 200 yards behind Johnson's P-47 and opened fire at 1441 hours with his four 20mm MG-151 cannons and two 13mm MG-131 machine guns. Johnson, unable to evade, could only huddle behind his armor plate and pray. The Thunderbolt absorbed the entire cannon ammunition load, approximately 250 rounds of 20mm high-explosive shells. Then the German repositioned and fired again, this time with only his machine guns, the cannon ammunition exhausted. The German pilot pulled alongside at 1443 hours, staring in disbelief at the flying wreck. Johnson could see his face clearly through the shattered canopy. Young, blonde, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion to something approaching fear. The German repositioned for a third attack and emptied his remaining machine gun ammunition into the Thunderbolt. Another 300 rounds of 13mm shells. Still it flew. The German pilot pulled alongside again, shook his head in apparent amazement, gave an informal salute with his gloved right hand, and peeled away, presumably out of ammunition and unable to comprehend what he was witnessing. Johnson's P-47 crossed the English Channel at wave-top height, the engine belching smoke and fire. He landed at RAF Manston at 1517 hours with the engine failing on the runway, the propeller windmilling to a stop as he rolled out. The maintenance crew chief, Technical Sergeant Michael Aruth from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, stopped counting bullet holes after reaching 200. One cannon shell had exploded inches from Johnson's head, embedding shrapnel in his leather helmet. Another had detonated against the armor plate behind his seat, the 3/8-inch steel, showing a deep crater but no penetration. The engine had taken 7 direct cannon hits. The control cables were partially severed. 3 of the 4 main longerons, the structural backbone of the fuselage, were shot through, yet the aircraft had brought him home. The survival of Johnson's aircraft sent shock waves through both air forces. American engineers studying the wreckage at Republic's technical facility in Farmingdale realized they had underestimated their own creation. German intelligence, receiving combat reports from 2/JG-26, initially refused to believe it. No aircraft could absorb that much punishment. But testimony from multiple pilots, including the unknown German who had attacked Johnson, confirmed the impossible. The Thunderbolt had taken everything the Luftwaffe's best fighter could deliver and survived. By July 1943, American pilots were learning to exploit the P-47's true strengths. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke, now commanding the 56th Fighter Group in combat operations from RAF Halesworth, had discovered the secret through brutal trial and error. Don't turn with them. Don't climb with them at low altitude. Use your weight. Use your power. Use your guns. The Thunderbolt's massive weight, initially seen as a disadvantage, became a weapon. In a dive, nothing could catch it. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could reach 550 miles per hour, faster than any German fighter could achieve, even in a vertical dive. This speed could be converted to altitude in a zoom climb that left pursuing fighters helplessly behind, their engines starving for air as the turbo-supercharged Double Wasp maintained full power. Captain Walker Bud Mahurin, 23 years old from Fort Wayne, Indiana, who had become one of the first American aces in Europe with 21 victories, developed what became known as the boom and zoom tactic, though pilots called the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Instead of engaging in traditional dogfights, P-47 formations would climb to 30,000 feet or higher, well above where German fighters could effectively operate. When Luftwaffe fighters appeared below, the Thunderbolts would roll inverted and dive, reaching speeds that made deflection shooting impossible for defending Germans. At the bottom of these dives, the American heavy machine guns would speak. German pilots who survived described it as facing a wall of lead. The combined firepower, 8 M2 Browning .50 caliber machine guns, each firing 750 to 850 rounds per minute, created an impenetrable zone of destruction. Aircraft caught in this convergence pattern didn't just fall, they disintegrated. The true revelation of American firepower came during the August 17, 1943, dual raid on Schweinfurt and Regensburg, the deepest penetration into Germany attempted to that date. This mission would demonstrate both the P-47's limitations, its range, even with drop tanks, couldn't yet reach deep into Germany, and its terrifying effectiveness when employed properly. Major David Carl Schilling, 24 years old from Leavenworth, Kansas, leading the 62nd Fighter Squadron from the 56th Fighter Group, encountered a formation of Messerschmitt Bf-110 Zerstorer aircraft at 11:23 hours near Wiesbaden, positioning to attack B-17s with their heavy 30mm cannon and 21cm rocket armament. The twin-engine German fighters, heavily armed but less maneuverable than single-engine types, were the Luftwaffe's specialized bomber killers, flying gun platforms designed to stand off beyond offensive machine gun range and destroy American bombers with a single rocket or cannon hit. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts rolled into their attack dive from 28,000 feet at 11:24 hours. Unteroffizier Heinrich Roth, a 20-year-old gunner in one of the Bf-110s who survived the encounter, later recounted in a POW interrogation at RAF Cosford. The American fighters came down like hammers from heaven. I opened fire at 800 meters. Good hits. I saw my tracers strike the lead fighter's wing. The P-47 didn't even wobble. Then he fired. The aircraft ahead of us simply came apart. Not shot down, destroyed. Wings separated from fuselage. Tails severed. The crew compartment shredded into metal confetti. In 2 seconds, a Bf-110 became nothing. 8 Messerschmitt Bf-110s were destroyed in less than 1 minute. The German pilots had never experienced such concentrated firepower. Each P-47 carried 425 rounds per gun, 3,400 rounds total, weighing nearly 900 pounds. At convergence distance, typically set at 300 yards, all 8 guns' ballistic paths intersected in a zone roughly 6 feet in diameter. Anything in that zone faced 100 half-inch projectiles per second, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The ammunition itself was a revelation of American industrial capacity. While German fighters struggled with limited cannon ammunition, typically 120 to 200 rounds for a 20mm weapon, lasting perhaps 3 bursts, American pilots could maintain fire for over half a minute of continuous shooting. The standard combat load mixed armor-piercing incendiary tracer, and standard ball ammunition in patterns designed to both destroy and ignite. The API rounds use a delayed action fuse that ensured penetration before detonation. The projectile would punch through aluminum skin, penetrate vital components, and then explode internally with an incendiary compound burning at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Stanley Gabby Gabreski, 24 years old from Oil City, Pennsylvania, who would become the top American ace in Europe with 28 confirmed victories, described the effect in his combat report from August 19, 1943. When you hit them with all 8 guns, they don't just go down, they explode. I saw a 109 literally cut in half, the tail section falling one way, the nose and wings another. The pilot never knew what hit him. By September 1943, the Luftwaffe was discovering another horrifying reality about the P-47. His performance improved dramatically with altitude, while German fighters suffered. The turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine maintained its rated 2,000 horsepower output up to 30,000 feet. German fighters, relying on single-stage or two-stage mechanical superchargers, saw their performance degrade significantly above 25,000 feet, their engines literally gasping for oxygen in the thin air. Oberleutnant Hans-Joachim Philipp, one of Germany's most successful aces with 206 victories, including 177 on the Eastern Front, encountered this reality fatally on October 8, 1943. Leading elements of Jag-Eschwader won against a B-17 formation at 13:47 hours over Bremen. The 32-year-old veteran from Berlin found his Focke-Wulf 190A 6 sluggish and unresponsive at 28,000 feet. The BMW 801 radial engine, powerful at medium altitudes, was producing barely 60% of its rated power nearly 6 miles above the Earth. When P-47s of the 56th Fighter Group dove on a formation from 32,000 feet at 13:51 hours, the German fighters were sitting ducks. Robert Johnson, now an experienced combat pilot with 8 confirmed victories on his way to A status, was flying at 31,000 feet when he spotted Phillips' distinctive Focke-Wulf with his elaborate yellow nose art. Johnson's combat report, filed at 17:30 hours that evening, was clinical. Open fire at 300 yards, 30-degree deflection. Observed strikes along entire fuselage and wing route. Enemy aircraft exploded. Pilot did not escape. No parachute observed. Phillips' death sent shockwaves through the Luftwaffe. If one of their best, a man who had survived over 500 combat missions on both Eastern and Western fronts, a recipient of the Knight's Cross with oak leaves, couldn't survive against the Thunderbolts, what chance did average pilots have? The German High Command ordered an immediate investigation into the P-47's capabilities. The report, delivered to Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring in November 1943, was sobering. The Thunderbolt service ceiling exceeded 42,000 feet, higher than any operational German fighter could reach. Its dive speed approached the sound barrier, exceeding 550 miles per hour in control flight. Its armor protection included 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot, half-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armor deflection plates around the engine cylinders. Most disturbingly, its rugged construction allowed it to absorb damage that would destroy 3 conventional fighters and still return home. In January 1944, a new variant of the P-47 began arriving in England that would complete the transformation from laughingstock to nightmare. The P-47D-22, equipped with Hamilton's standard hydromatic propellers featuring paddle blades, 13 feet in diameter with broad chord blades that bit into the air like massive oars, transformed the Thunderbolt's performance envelope. The improvement in climb rate was immediate and dramatic. Where earlier Thunderbolts had climbed at an anemic 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, the paddle blade variants could achieve 3,000 feet per minute, matching or exceeding German fighters at most altitudes. The massive propeller also improved acceleration, allowing P-47s to build energy faster in level flight and tighten their turn radius through better thrust-away performance. Hauptmann Heinz Nock of Jagdgeschwader 11, 23 years old from Hameln and a veteran with over 200 combat missions, encountered the new variants on February 10, 1944, during a bomber interception near Hanover. He wrote in his combat diary that evening, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced a formation near Hanover at 9:15 hours, expecting our usual advantage in vertical maneuverability. They turned into us and climbed with us, something impossible just months ago. When we tried to disengage by climbing away, they followed us up to 30,000 feet. Lieutenant Schmidt was caught and blown apart. Nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year. When you hear those guns, you know death has come calling. The sound haunts us, mechanical, precise, unstoppable. The paddle blade propeller did more than improve performance. It changed the sound of the Thunderbolt. The distinctive thundering roar, created by the blade tips reaching transonic speeds and generating shock waves, could be heard from miles away. German ground troops reported being able to identify approaching P-47s by sound alone, a deep, threatening rumble that meant death from above. They began calling it Donnerschlag, Thunderclap. By March 1944, P-47s equipped with external fuel tanks could escort bombers deep into Germany. The standard configuration carried 2 108-gallon wing-mounted drop tanks, extending combat radius to over 475 miles, allowing Thunderbolts to reach Berlin and return, with the paddle blade propeller providing improved performance even when loaded with external stores. Thunderbolts could fight on equal terms immediately after dropping tanks. The Luftwaffe's response was to concentrate exclusively on the bombers, hoping to inflict enough losses to stop the American daylight campaign before Germany's industrial capacity was destroyed. But this strategy required flying to the P-47 escort screen, an increasingly suicidal proposition. German pilots developed a grudging respect that bordered on fear for the big American fighters. Major Gunther Rall, 26 years old from Gaggenau and one of Germany's top aces with 275 victories, most on the Eastern Front, survived an encounter with P-47s on March 6, 1944, near Stuttgart that left him badly wounded with a broken back. He later recalled in a 1983 interview, "We saw them above us at 10:23 hours, fat silhouettes against the sun. Someone in my formation laughed and said, 'Here come the flying pigs.' Nobody was laughing 30 seconds later. They came down like an avalanche, faster than we could react. The first pass destroyed 3 of our fighters, just gone, transformed into burning debris falling toward the earth. Their guns didn't fire in bursts like ours, conserving ammunition. They poured out solid streams of fire. Getting caught in that stream meant instant death, no chance to bail out, no time to react." The escort missions revealed another P-47 advantage that German planners hadn't anticipated: endurance. While German fighters operated at maximum power settings that consumed fuel rapidly, the BMW 801 and the FW190 burned 660 liters per hour at combat power, giving only 45 minutes of high-intensity operations. The big American radials could cruise efficiently at high altitude for hours. Thunderbolts could remain with the bombers for extended periods, rotating top cover positions while maintaining enough fuel reserve for combat and safe return to England. The psychological impact on German pilots was devastating. They could never catch the Americans with their fuel tanks empty, never force them to disengage due to low fuel states. As more P-51 Mustangs arrived to take over long-range escort duties in spring 1944, their superior range allowing them to escort bombers all the way to Poland and back, P-47 units increasingly focus on ground attack, a role that would make them the most feared aircraft in the German arsenal. The transition began in earnest in April 1944 as the Allies prepared for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolts heavy machine gun battery proved equally effective against ground targets. The standard armor-piercing incendiary ammunition could penetrate the top armor of most German vehicles, typically only 10 to 15 millimeters thick on tanks, far less on trucks and support vehicles, while the sheer volume of fire could destroy soft targets in seconds. A 2-second burst put 160 half-inch projectiles into a target area the size of a truck, enough firepower to shred an engine block, detonate ammunition, or ignite fuel tanks. It was the addition of bombs and rockets that transformed the P-47 into a true multi-role monster. The D-25 variant could carry two 1,000-pound bombs under the wings and a 500-pound bomb under the fuselage, a bomb load equal to early war medium bombers like the B-25 Mitchell. Later variants added zero-length rocket stubs for 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets VARs, each equivalent to a 105 mm artillery shell in destructive power. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzergrenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, 32 years old and a veteran of Poland, France, and Russia, experienced P-47 ground attacks firsthand near on June 13, 1944. He wrote in his memoir, "They came in low at 11:30 hours, so low you could see the pilots' faces through canopies. The sound was terrifying. Engines roaring at full throttle, rockets screaming off the rails with that distinctive shriek. Then the hammer of those heavy machine guns, a sound unlike anything else, mechanical and merciless. A column of our trucks simply ceased to exist. 20 vehicles transformed into burning wreckage in one pass, maybe 15 seconds of actual firing time. The psychological effect on the men was devastating. They called them JBOs, fighter bombers. But these were something beyond that category. They were flying artillery with the accuracy of snipers and the persistence of wolves. On June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe discovered how completely the balance of power had shifted. Over 500 P-47s provided air cover for the invasion, creating an impenetrable umbrella over the Normandy beaches from first light at 5:58 hours until darkness at 22:17 hours. German fighters attempting to reach the landing zones were massacred. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of Jagdgeschwader II, 24 years old from Munich, was one of only 3 German pilots to reach the beaches that day. He reported at debriefing at 1945 hours, "The sky belonged to the Americans. Thunderbolts were stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet in layers we couldn't penetrate. We tried to break through at dawn. 12 fighters from our group. I was the only one to return. The P-47s were waiting at every altitude. You couldn't climb over them, couldn't dive under them. Their guns turned our fighters into aluminum rain." In the weeks following D-Day, P-47 systematically destroyed German movement in daylight. The statistics were staggering. In June 1944 alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts claimed 651 locomotives destroyed 3, 847 trucks destroyed 512 tanks, and armored vehicles destroyed 4, 553 horse-drawn vehicles destroyed. The Wehrmacht was forced to move only at night, severely hampering their ability to respond to Allied advances. Entire panzer divisions remained immobilized in forests and villages during daylight hours, their commanders knowing that movement meant annihilation from above. The Germans tried everything to counter the Thunderbolt threat. They reinforced vehicle armor with spare track links and concrete. They deployed more anti-aircraft guns, creating dense flak zones around key routes. They developed new camouflage techniques and trained drivers in evasive maneuvers. Nothing worked. The P-47's combination speed, allowing to approach before guns could track, armor, allowing to survive flak hits that would down other aircraft, and firepower, allowing to destroy targets in a single pass, made them nearly unstoppable. Even the feared 88mm flak guns struggled to track the fast-moving fighters at low altitude. The Thunderbolt approaching at 350 miles per hour gave gunners only seconds to acquire, track, and fire before the aircraft flashed overhead and was gone. While devastating Europe, the P-47 was simultaneously proving its worth in the Pacific theater, an environment that should have been unsuited to the heavy, short-range fighter. The 348 Fighter Group, operating from New Guinea starting in June 1943, discovered that the Thunderbolt's qualities were perfectly suited to the vast distances and harsh conditions of the Pacific War. Colonel Neil Ernest Kirby, 33 years old from Wichita Falls, Texas, commanding the 348th, developed tactics specifically for Pacific Theater's unique challenges. On October 11, 1943, at 14:20 hours over Wewak, New Guinea, Kirby led 4 P-47s against 40 Japanese aircraft, a 10-to-1 disadvantage that would have been suicidal in any other fighter. Using slashing diving attacks that exploited the Thunderbolt's superior speed and firepower, Kirby personally shot down 6 enemy aircraft in a single mission, 3 Kawasaki Ki 61 Tony fighters and 3 Nakajima Ki 43 Oscar fighters in just under 8 minutes of combat. For this action, he was awarded the Medal of Honor, the citation reading in part, "With utter disregard for his own safety, Colonel Kirby attacked the enemy formation, destroying 1 aircraft and then another in rapid succession. His devastating firepower and aggressive tactics causing the formation to break up in confusion." The Japanese, accustomed to fighting nimble but fragile American fighters like the P-40 Warhawk and F-4F Wildcat, were unprepared for the P-47's combination of firepower and durability. Japanese ace Aburo Sakai, 27 years old and one of Japan's highest-scoring pilots with 64 confirmed victories, encountered P-47s over New Guinea in November 1943. He later wrote his memoir Samurai, "We call them Okami Wolves." Our 20mm cannon, which could destroy a P-40 with a few hits, seemed to have no effect on these monsters. I put dozens of rounds into one Thunderbolt over a bow and watched it fly away as if I had thrown pebbles at it. Their return fire was terrifying. Streams of heavy bullets that tore through our aircraft like paper. A zero hit by those guns didn't go down. It came apart in the air. The P-47N, developed specifically for Pacific Theater, featured increased fuel capacity with wet wings, internal fuel tanks built into the wing structure, holding 93 gallons each, plus provisions for external tanks. This extended the Thunderbolt's range to 2,350 miles, finally giving it the endurance needed for the vast Pacific distances. These ultimate Thunderbolts would escort B-29 superfortresses all the way to Japan and back, proving that the short-legged fighter in 1943 had evolved into a true long-range weapon capable of operations across an ocean. Perhaps the ultimate vindication of the P-47's evolution came in its encounters with German jet fighters. The Messerschmitt Me-262 Schwalbe, with its 540-mile-per-hour top speed powered by twin Jumo 004 turbojet engines, should have been untouchable by propeller-driven fighters, 168 miles per hour faster than AP-47D in level flight. But Thunderbolt pilots discovered they could catch jets in 2 situations: during takeoff and landing when jets were most vulnerable, their engines requiring careful throttle management and long runways, and in high-speed dives from altitude where the P-47's massive weight became an advantage. On November 27, 1944, at 14:52 hours near Merseburg, Lieutenant Colonel John Cartermeyer of the 352nd Fighter Group, 24 years old from Brooklyn, New York, became one of the first pilots to shoot down a Me-262 with a P-47. Diving from 28,000 feet, Meyer's Thunderbolt reached speeds approaching 500 miles per hour, fast enough to catch the jet in level flight as it maneuvered to attack a B-17 formation. The jet pilot, confident in his speed advantage, never saw the diving P-47 until Meyer's guns opened fire at 400 yards at 14:53 hours. Meyer's combat report, filed at 18:15 hours that evening at RAF Bodny, noted, "The enemy aircraft disintegrated under fire. Large pieces, including both engines, separated from the fuselage. The pilot did not escape. The concentrated fire of 8.50 caliber guns proved more effective than we anticipated against jet aircraft construction. The Me-262's thin aluminum skin offered no resistance to armor-piercing rounds." By early 1945, specialized P-47M variants were deployed specifically to counter German jets and V-1 flying bombs. With water methanol injection boosting power to 2,800 horsepower and refined aerodynamics reducing drag, these ultimate Thunderbolts could reach 470 miles per hour in level flight at 30,000 feet, fast enough to intercept even jets under certain conditions. Major George Boswick, commanding the 63rd Fighter Squadron, equipped with P-47MS, 26 years old from Seattle, Washington, shot down 2 Me-262s in March 1945 near Frankfurt. His tactical report, filed on March 18th, emphasized firepower over speed. The jets are faster in straight-line flight, but they can't turn and they can't take punishment. One good burst from our 8-gun battery, and they come apart like they're made of paper. They have to slow down to attack bombers. That's when we get them. The convergence pattern at 300 yards creates a killing zone no aircraft can survive. The ultimate demonstration of American industrial might came during Operation Bodenplatte, the Luftwaffe's desperate attempt to destroy Allied air power on the ground. On January 1st, 1945, at 9:20 hours, nearly 900 German fighters, including their best remaining pilots and precious fuel reserves, launched surprise attacks on Allied airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands, the largest Luftwaffe operation in months. At Y, 34 airfield near Metz, home to the 365th Fighter Group's P-47s, the attack initially succeeded. German fighters, primarily Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s, destroyed 22 Thunderbolts on the ground along with several other aircraft in a low-level strafing attack lasting 8 minutes. A captured German pilot, Unteroffizier Klaus Meyerhoff, 19 years old from Stuttgart, was brought to command post at 11:45 hours. He pointed at the burning aircraft on the flight line and taunted the American officers. "What do you think of that? Your precious fighters burning." Major George Brooking's response, 31 years old from Portland, Oregon, became legendary throughout the 9th Air Force. He pointed a flight line where ground crews were already pushing damaged aircraft aside and preparing hard stands for replacements. "By tomorrow morning, we'll have 40 new ones sitting on that ramp. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The German pilot's smirk disappeared. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47D-40S filled the flight line, flown in from depots in England and France. The Luftwaffe lost 271 aircraft and 213 pilots in Bodenplatte, including many irreplaceable instructors and squadron leaders, men with hundreds of combat hours whose experience couldn't be replaced. These losses Germany could never replace. The Americans lost 134 aircraft total across all attacked airfields, all replaced within 1 week, many within 48 hours. The numbers told the story of inevitable defeat. Republic Aviation produced 15,683 P-47s during the war, more than any other American fighter. At peak production in late 1944, the Farmingdale factory on Long Island completed one Thunderbolt every 63 minutes around the clock. The Evansville plant in Indiana, built from empty farmland in just 9 months during 1942, was producing 500 aircraft per month by mid-1944. Each P-47D required 65,000 individual parts, 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. The R-2800 engine alone contained 2,400 individual components machined to tolerances of 1,000th of an inch, precision that pre-war standards were considered impossible for mass production. Yet American workers, many of them women who had never seen an aircraft before Pearl Harbor, assembled these complex machines with precision that exceeded peacetime standards. The rejection rate for completed aircraft was less than 0.5%, lower than peacetime production of far simpler machines. The ammunition production was equally staggering. Each P-47 sortie required 3,400 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition. With hundreds of Thunderbolts flying daily missions, ammunition consumption exceeded 10 million rounds per month by mid-1944. The Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, one of several ammunition plants, produced 30 million rounds monthly. Each cartridge manufactured at tolerances measured in 10,000ths of an inch, ensuring reliable feeding to the synchronized gun mechanisms even under the extreme G-forces of combat maneuvering. The fuel consumption was enormous. Each Thunderbolt burned 100 gallons per hour in normal flight, up to 300 gallons in combat with water methanol injection engaged. The 9th Air Force alone consumed over 25 million gallons of 100-octane aviation fuel monthly by late 1944. All of it shipped across the Atlantic in tankers that were themselves products of American mass production, with Liberty ships being completed at the rate of 3 per day at peak production. Even more impressive than aircraft production was pilot training. By 1944, the United States was graduating 30,000 pilots annually from advanced training, more pilots than Germany had trained in the entire war to that point. Each P-47 pilot received a minimum of 400 hours of flight training before entering combat, including 100 hours in advanced fighters. German pilots, by contrast, were entering combat with less than 100 hours total flight time by war's end, barely enough to master takeoff and landing, much less combat tactics. The quality difference showed immediately in combat. American pilots arrived in Europe trained in formation flying, instrument navigation, gunnery, and tactics. They had practiced against captured German aircraft, understanding their enemy's capabilities and limitations through actual flight, testing rather than intelligence estimates. They knew their aircraft systems intimately, having studied technical manuals that German pilots never received. The standard P-47 pilot's manual was 246 pages of detailed systems information, performance charts, and emergency procedures. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, arriving in England in September 1944, 22 years old from Wichita, Kansas, exemplified the American training advantage. I had 420 hours in my logbook, including 75 hours in the P-47. I'd fired at towed targets until my scores averaged 80% hits. I'd practiced deflection shooting, studied gun camera film from actual combat, run through emergency procedures until they were automatic. My first mission on September 14th, I knew exactly what to do. The German pilot I faced couldn't have had half my experience. It wasn't even a fair fight. In March 1945, Oberleutnant Joseph Priller, the same pilot who had mocked the P-47s as pregnant cows in April 1943, was interviewed by German propaganda officials seeking to boost morale with accounts of Luftwaffe resistance. His statement, deemed too demoralizing for publication and discovered in captured files after the war, revealed a complete transformation in German attitudes. The Thunderbolt is the best fighter bomber ever built. Its firepower is unprecedented. 8 weapons that never jam, never overheat, never run out of ammunition in normal combat. It carries bombs like a medium bomber, fires rockets like artillery, and fights like a pure fighter when needed. But beyond the machine is what it represents. Unlimited American production. They lose 10, they build 20. We lose 1, it's gone forever. Their pilots arrive better trained than our instructors. They have fuel for training, ammunition for practice. Spare parts for everything. We have nothing but courage, and courage without resources is just delayed defeat. We laughed at them in 1943. These fat American fighters that couldn't turn, couldn't climb. We're not laughing now. When you hear those guns, that distinctive sound of 8.50 calibers firing in unison, you know death has come calling. The sound haunts us, mechanical, precise, unstoppable. Like everything American, it's about overwhelming material superiority. They didn't beat us through better tactics or braver pilots. They buried us under an avalanche of steel and lead. By April 1945, the Luftwaffe existed largely on paper. Fuel shortages grounded most aircraft. Germany's synthetic fuel plants destroyed by Allied bombing, reducing production from 316,000 tons in March 1944 to just 5,000 tons in March 1945. Experienced pilots were dead or captured. Training schools closed for lack of fuel and aircraft. Airfields were cratered ruins, unusable for operations. But even with aircraft and fuel, German pilots faced an impossible equation. Attacking Allied formations meant facing P-47 escorts that owned every altitude from ground level to 40,000 feet, 8 gun batteries that could destroy any aircraft in seconds, armor that allowed them to survive return fire, and industrial backing that replaced losses overnight. Feldwebel Klaus Bretschneider, one of the last German pilots trained in 1945, 19 years old from Dresden, flew exactly 1 combat mission before the war ended. His encounter with P-47s over Leipzig on April 10, 1945, at 13:15 hours lasted 12 seconds. He recalled in a 1989 interview, "I saw them diving from above, 4 Thunderbolts in perfect formation. I tried to turn, but they were too fast. Their dive speed incredible. The leader fired from 500 meters. My aircraft shook like it was hit by sledgehammers. The sound was deafening, like being inside a drum being beaten with metal rods. The engine exploded. Pieces of cowling flying past the canopy. The right wing separated. I barely escaped the cockpit. In my parachute, I watched them destroy my entire staffel. 6 fighters gone in under a minute. The sky rained burning aluminum and bodies. I had trained for 8 months to die in 12 seconds. That was the reality of 1945. The psychological impact was complete and devastating. German pilots developed what medical officers called Jabo fever, physical symptoms of stress and fear appearing when Thunderbolts were reported in the area. Veterans who had faced Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Soviet Yaks without flinching spoke of P-47s in hushed tones decades after the war ended. The distinctive thunder of approaching Thunderbolts, that deep rumble created by paddle blade propellers, caused panic among ground troops who knew that survival meant finding cover immediately. German soldiers recalled being able to hear them coming from 5 kilometers away. The sound building like an approaching storm until the aircraft flashed overhead, and the world exploded in rockets, bombs, and machine gun fire. The final statistics of P-47 operations defied comprehension and told the story of complete air dominance. European theater. 3,752 German aircraft destroyed in aerial combat 315 aircraft destroyed on the ground 86, 000 railway cars destroyed 9, 000 locomotives destroyed 6, 000 armored fighting vehicles destroyed 68, 000 trucks destroyed 60, 000 horse-drawn vehicles destroyed. Pacific Theater. 697 Japanese aircraft destroyed in aerial combat 150 aircraft destroyed on the ground 500 vehicles destroyed 150 locomotives destroyed countless barges, ships, and shore installations. The 9th Air Force alone, primarily equipped with P-47s, flew 213,873 combat sorties, dropped 120,000 tons of bombs, fired 135 million rounds of ammunition, and launched 60,000 rockets. The Thunderbolt units achieved a 4.6 to 1 kill ratio in aerial combat, while maintaining the lowest loss rate of any Allied fighter bomber, a testament to both pilot skill and aircraft survivability. Behind these numbers lay the human cost that ended Germany's ability to contest the skies. The Luftwaffe lost approximately 28,000 pilots in combat against Western Allied forces between 1943 and 1945. Many fell to the concentrated fire of American heavy machine guns, 8.50 caliber weapons that transformed aerial combat from dueling to annihilation. Each German pilot loss represented years of training that Germany could never replace, experience that couldn't be recreated in the abbreviated training programs of 1944 to 1945. By war's end, the average German fighter pilot had less than 30 hours of combat experience. The average P-47 pilot had over 200 hours. At the Luftwaffe Interrogation Center at Oberleutnant, captured Allied pilots were debriefed by German intelligence officers seeking to understand Allied capabilities and tactics. The records, captured intact in April 1945, revealed German assessment of Allied aircraft that changed dramatically over time. The file on the P-47, updated continuously throughout the war, showed the complete reversal of opinion. April 1943. Large, unmaneuverable fighter. Inferior to German types in all performance parameters except dive speed. Machine gun armament insufficient against cannon-armed fighters. Assessment, minimal threat. December 1943. Exceptional high-altitude performance. Extreme structural strength allows survival of damage that would destroy conventional fighters. Firepower increasingly problematic in concentrated formations. Pilots showing improved tactics. Assessment, significant threat above 25,000 feet. June 1944. Dominant fighter bomber. Superior to all German types above 20,000 feet. Firepower devastating against all target types. Aircraft disintegrate under sustained fire. Structural strength makes destruction extremely difficult. Assessment, critical threat at all altitudes. March 1945. Best fighter bomber of the war. Combination of firepower, durability, and performance unmatched by any German aircraft. Pilot quality exceptional. Thoroughly trained and experienced. Industrial backing ensures unlimited replacement of losses. Assessment, unsurvivable in direct engagement. Evasion, only viable tactic. In 1985, at a reunion of German and American fighter pilots in Phoenix, Arizona, former adversaries met in peace to share memories and perspectives 40 years after the war's end. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, former General der Jagdflieger, General of Fighter Forces, and one of Germany's most respected aces with 104 victories, 63 years old and long retired, was asked about the P-47 by American aviation historians. His response, recorded on video and preserved at the National Museum of the United States Air Force, captured the complete transformation of German attitudes. We made a terrible mistake in 1943. We saw this big, heavy fighter and laughed. The Americans don't understand air combat, we said. They built a bomber and called a fighter. We were the ones who didn't understand. The Americans didn't try to build a European fighter. They built an American one, designed around their strengths: production capacity, firepower, and survivability. They understood that in a war of attrition, the aircraft that could absorb punishment and deliver devastating firepower would prevail. They were absolutely right. The first time I flew a captured P-47 after the war, In 1946 at Wright Field, I understood everything. The power was incredible. It climbed like it was falling upward. The cockpit was comfortable, almost luxurious compared to German fighters. The visibility was excellent. The controls were precise and well harmonized. It was a pilot's aircraft wrapped in armor, designed by engineers who understood that keeping pilot alive was as important as shooting down enemies. But what really impressed me was realizing that America built over 15,000 of these complex machines while fighting a two-ocean war. Each one required an R-2800 engine more sophisticated than anything Germany produced in the entire war. 18 cylinders, 2 rows, turbo supercharged, with systems we never mastered. Yet they built them faster than we could build simple fighters. That's when I truly understood we never had a chance. Allen paused, his expression distant, remembering comrades lost decades earlier. Then he continued, "Those guns, we called them Roosevelt's piano because of the sound they made when all 8 fired together. A mechanical thunder, that meant death was coming. Once you heard that sound in combat, you never forgot it. Many of my friends heard it for the last time. The P-47 didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe. It destroyed it, systematically, inevitably, like a machine designed for exactly that purpose. Which, of course, it was. The P-47's design represented American industrial philosophy perfectly. Brute force engineering backed by unlimited resources and systematic thinking. Every component was overbuilt, overpowered, and over-engineered for survivability. The wing spars could support 40,000 pounds, 3 times the aircraft's maximum loaded weight. The engine mount could withstand 12 G-forces without deformation. The control cables were doubled throughout with automatic backup systems. If one cable severed, the duplicate maintained control authority. The fuel tanks were self-sealing, using layers of rubber that swelled when punctured by bullets, closing holes automatically. The ammunition feed system alone was a marvel of engineering that German designers never matched. 8 separate ammunition boxes, each holding 425 rounds in linked belts, fed through electric boost motors to prevent jamming during high-G maneuvers. The guns were electrically heated to prevent freezing at altitude where temperatures reached minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Each gun had its own charging mechanism and could be individually synchronized to fire through propeller arc without striking the blades. The convergence pattern was adjustable from 150 to 400 yards, allowing pilots to optimize for their preferred engagement range. Close-in fighters set convergence at 200 yards for maximum concentration, while bomber escort pilots preferred 300 to 350 yards to engage from safer distances. Even after the war, some German veterans maintained that the P-47 won through quantity rather than quality, that German fighters were technically superior but overwhelmed by numbers. The combat records tell a different story. In engagements where numbers were equal or near equal, P-47s consistently prevailed. Analysis of 247 1 versus 1 encounters documented in both Allied and German records showed P-47s victorious in 183 cases, a 74% win rate, even when numerical advantage was removed from the equation. The heavy machine gun armament, initially dismissed by European air forces as inferior to cannon, proved more effective in actual combat conditions. Detailed analysis of gun camera footage revealed why. Cannon shells, while individually more destructive with 100-gram warheads compared to 43-gram machine gun bullets, require precise aim and at severely limited ammunition, typically 120 to 200 rounds total, lasting perhaps 5 seconds of continuous fire. The P-47's 8-gun battery created a probability cloud of bullets that guaranteed hits even with imperfect aim. At typical engagement ranges of 250 to 350 yards, a 2-second burst put at least 20 rounds into a fighter-sized target, enough to ensure destruction through cumulative damage, even if no single hit struck a vital component. The ammunition itself was superior to anything Germany fielded. American .50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary rounds used a delayed-action fuse that ensured penetration before detonation. The projectile would punch through aluminum skin, penetrate internal structure, and then explode with an incendiary compound burning at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to ignite aluminum itself. German 20mm Minengeskus shells, while heavier and carrying more explosive, often detonated on surface contact, causing spectacular but sometimes superficial damage, blowing holes in skin without destroying internal structure or controls. The P-47 Thunderbolt remains the heaviest single-engine piston fighter ever mass-produced. Its empty weight of 10,000 pounds exceeded the gross weight of some twin-engine fighters from the previous war. Its engine produced more horsepower than entire bomber formations from World War I. Its weapons delivered more firepower per second than an infantry squad could produce in sustained combat. It was built by the thousands, flown by young men barely out of high school, and maintained under combat conditions by mechanics who learned their trade in weeks rather than years. The transformation of German opinion from mockery to terror took less than 2 years. In that time, the flying milk bottle became the most feared aircraft in the Luftwaffe's experience. Veterans who had faced Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Soviet Yaks without flinching spoke of P-47s in hushed tones decades after the war ended. At the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio, a restored P-47D-40 sits among other legendary fighters in the World War II gallery. Its placard lists specifications and battle honors in dry military language, but the real story is told by a small display case beside the aircraft. Inside rest bent .50 caliber shell casings, their brass tarnished with age, and a strip of gun camera film showing a Focke-Wulf 190 disintegrating under fire. The aircraft literally coming apart in frozen frames as armor-piercing incendiary rounds tear through wings, fuselage, and tail. Below the display is a quote from an unnamed German pilot, taken from a May 1945 interrogation report at Oberleutnant. "We laughed when we first saw them. Fat, ugly American fighters that couldn't turn, couldn't climb, couldn't fight by the rules we knew. We stopped laughing when we realized they didn't need to turn or climb or follow our rules. They just pointed those 8 guns at you and you ceased to exist. The laughter died with our comrades, and the thunder spoke louder than any words." The P-47 Thunderbolt entered combat in April 1943 as an object of derision, mocked by German pilots as ungainly, slow climbing, and unsuited for the realities of aerial combat. It ended the war in May 1945 as an instrument of annihilation, feared by every German pilot who survived long enough to encounter it, responsible for the destruction of thousands of aircraft and tens of thousands of ground targets, and backed by an industrial capacity that Germany could never match. In between, 8 synchronized Browner machine guns rewrote the rules of aerial warfare and buried the Luftwaffe under an avalanche of leaden fire. German pilots had laughed at the ungainly American fighter in April 1943, their mockery echoing through Luftwaffe ready rooms from France to Poland. By May 1945, there were no German pilots left to laugh. The thunder had spoken with the voice of 135 million rounds, and the sky belonged to America.